All right. Good morning, everybody. For those of you that might catch part of this live or go back and watch the replay, um, this is gonna be a really short stream because I'm recording this for YouTube, and then I'll stream later on and stuff like that. But I'm just gonna shoot this, cut it off, and then come back later. Um, like the title says, I'm just gonna go over the new four-way dampers that CarX put in their game. I know I am a little bit late to the party as far as making a video for this and going over it, but uh, it's here now, so just bear with me. Um, so this is obviously not going to be near as long as me doing the whole tuning guide thing that I did. This will probably only take a few minutes because guess what? The four-way dampers are not as daunting and they're not as scary as they look like when you go into the tuning menu. They're not. They look daunting because of all the numbers, all the different categories, all the different adjustments you can make, but they are, once you watch this and I explain them to you, they're going to be hopefully really straightforward to you. I hope it just kind of clicks in your head like, oh, that's all it is? Well, that's not too bad. So hopefully that's how it goes for you guys. I'm going to explain them as simply as possible, try and give some examples here and there and stuff like that. So just a overview of the four-way dampers. Before this update, we had what are referred to as one-way dampers, where you had your percentages for your front and your rear, and those are equivalent to the clicks for the dials on the top of a coilover. One-way dampers, those clicks that you make on those adjustments, those are going to control the compression and the decompression of the shock. Now, what you're doing when you do that is you're not tuning how hard or soft the damper is. You're tuning how fast or slow the damper reacts to body roll, to suspension upset from the road, to driver input with acceleration and deceleration, stuff like that. Simplest way to put it is the softer you go in the damper, the more free the spring on the coilover is allowed to move. So if you have a 10K spring and you have your damper turned all the way down, you're letting that 10K spring move as freely as possible without any resistance from the damper. So that's not necessarily going to be ideal for most applications when we're talking about racing and drifting and stuff like that, because it's going to start going towards more of the effects of what a blown shock is. So you don't have any of that resistance, so all you're using for your resistance for suspension upset and bumps and absorption and things like that is just the spring. And that's when you see, cars driving down the interstate and they've got a blown shock, and you see the front end when they hit a bump and it just kind of bounces up and down like a bouncy castle, and it takes it a few seconds for it to finally settle down, because your spring and your damper do two different things. Your spring is a value of stiffness. Your shock is a value of resistance. So I'm just going to use my Fox body as an example. I have the Feel Suspension. Huge shout out to them. I had their Feel Suspension spring rates on this car for their drift spec stuff. So it's a 10K front, 5K rear. They recommend doing the 10K if you don't run a front roll bar, and I like the feeling of a front roll bar. It's what I'm used to. So I run the 10K instead of the 8K front. And it feels absolutely fantastic on this game as well. So shout out to Feel for making just solid suspension setups, and for CarX for making their suspension model in their cars decently accurate. So shift over to the dampers. I'm just going to go column by column. Your quick tightening, or your quick damper setting first, this is what is going to translate bumps, dips, cracks, humps, things like that, like imperfections in the road. This is going to determine the quality, so to speak, of your coilovers if you're not just driving on a flat surface. So these are going to be the things that are going to send a jolt to your suspension in a quick manner. So if you're driving on a bumpy track, say on CarX, if you're driving on Red Rock, or parking A or things like that, where you've got a lot of undulations in the pavement, you have a lot of dips and bumps and cracks and stuff like that, you want to focus on the quick tightening just as much as the quick damper settings just as much as the regular damper settings. Um, you typically, just as a general rule of thumb, excuse me, you want to keep your quick damper settings softer so that you can retain good ride quality over imperfections in the road and things like that, so that you can keep your regular damper settings on a stiffer range so that you can tune and fine tune the control that you want out of your suspension, unloading and loading from your inputs as you're driving. So the quick tightening, just starting off, the quick tightening, this is going to control the contraction of the suspension. This is going to control the resistance that the damper provides for jolts that are going to make the suspension compress in a fast manner. So you're driving down the road and there is an undulation in the pavement, and there is a crack like this in the pavement, and you drive over that, and when your wheel hits it, the first thing that's going to happen is your suspension is going to lift and it's going to decompress, or it's going to compress. Sorry, it's early. And you, just as a way to describe it, so if you have it soft, if you have it too soft, you're going to get a compression that is defined as too fast, and that's where you're going to kind of get that spongy feeling, versus a rigid, responsive reaction to it. Then if you go towards the other end of the spectrum and you have it too stiff, you're going to get a delayed reaction from the suspension. So you're going to drive over it, you're going to hit that bump, and then after you hit the bump, you're going to get your compression from your suspension, and it's going to cause the entire car to get upset just going over that one bump. It's going to make the whole car and the wheel assembly and the tire want to lift off the ground because it can't absorb that shock and that bump from the pavement. So it's the same thing for the rear, same description. The retraction is the opposite. The retraction is how fast or slow your suspension decompresses after it's been compressed from a shock. There is a balance with figuring out your tightening to your retraction. You typically want to keep your tightening and your retraction, you either want to keep them, you can keep them equal if you want. You're going to simulate a one-way damper if you do that, as far as a one-way damper adjustment. I have it like that on this car, because as I went through and I spent hours figuring out the dampers and figuring out what felt good to me, this felt good on this car to me. So it made how the car reacts. Sorry, it made how the car reacts to the bumps and dips and stuff like that more predictable because they're equal. The tightening and the retraction, they have the same amount of resistance, so it made it to where I knew how fast the dampers were going to compress and decompress when I was hitting these bumps, and it made it more of a when you have them equal and you have it on the lower scale, you hit a bump and this is your shock, and it's going to compress and decompress at the same rate. So it felt good on this car. It made it predictable. This is just a fun throw around car. It's low horsepower, stuff like that. So But for a general rule of thumb, you typically want to keep the the tightening or the compression of your damper lower than your retraction, just so you don't get this effect of a rebound from your suspension. What you don't want when you're hitting bumps is you don't want your damper to be, so you hit a bump and it compresses, decompresses too much, and then compresses back and then settles. This is going to give you that kind of bouncing rebound effect, and that's going to make the car unsettled in a way that you don't want it to. It's going to make it unpredictable because you're going to get a extensive amount of load lifting off of the front or rear when you shouldn't be. So typically you keep it to where your tightening is lower than your retraction. You're usually going to stay within the 50 to 80% less range. So like if I have my retraction at 5,000 newton meters per second, or newton meters, oh my gosh, yeah, newton meters per second. If I had that at say 5,000, I would put my tightening somewhere in between 2,500 and 4,000. This is just to make it when you hit that bump in the road, it's going to compress and then it's going to decompress slowly to the point to where you want it to decompress at a rate that it decompresses to its resting point and it doesn't overextend and then have to compress back down to settle. So you want to hit that bump and you want it to compress and then decompress. The balance with the decompression is making sure that it doesn't decompress too slow, so that when you're going over multiple bumps in a row, you want to make sure that it can decompress enough so that it can be compressed again, so that you're not in essence hitting a bump stop and then your car, say you hit the second bump and your car is compressed too much still, and then it just jolts and bounces off the road and your whole front wheel assembly and everything is lifting off the road, and then you're losing your tire response and you're just having a blip in your car control that you have. So it's a happy balance with dampers. That's all it is. There's no perfect one way to set your dampers. It's going to change with your spring rates. It's going to change with the weight of your car. It's going to change with the driving surface that you're going over. It's going to change with the layout that you're running if you're running in a competition. There is no one perfect way to set dampers. It is a very trial and error thing. I will spend hours and hours and hours just tuning dampers to make them to where they have a perfect amount of response. My car stays settled, my car stays predictable no matter what conditions I'm driving over, whether I'm driving on a smooth surface like Atrin or I'm hitting the jump on the Minami layout on East Toge. So that is the quick settings for the four-way dampers. Now to jump over to the regular tightening and retraction. This tightening and retraction here, these two things, these are your original damper settings split apart. So if you took these two together right here, if you took them and combined them back together, those are your original damper settings that you had when it was a one-way damper. That was your adjustment that you had. So before, say you had, you put it at 50% on that, your equivalent to how it is now would be 5,000 tightening, 5,000 retraction, or 6,000, 7,000, whatever the value range is in there. So it can be translated back to the percentages. The thing is that I do not recommend that, because you have a totally different parameter and level of tuning that you can get out of this now. Just having the two-way dampers is massive. So this two-way damper setup here, if you were just looking at the two-way dampers for the regular tightening and retraction and you ignored this stuff here, this is what you're going to see on most all games, Forza and stuff like that. When you go over to the damper settings, you have your bump and your rebound, is what you might know it as. Your bump is your tightening or your compression. Your rebound is your retraction or your decompression. This is what is going to determine how freely the suspension can move under heavy inputs. So your turn in and how fast the suspension can compress on the loaded side, and how much it can decompress on the unloaded side, and how fast it can do those two things. Braking into a corner, how fast the front can load versus how fast the rear can unload. Accelerating out of a corner, how much your right corner, if you're coming out of a left turn, is gonna, like, how fast it's gonna load versus how fast the front is gonna try and unload, as you shift the weight towards the back of the vehicle. This is equally as important as the quick settings, because this is gonna control how the car responds to your inputs. So, say you have you're chasing somebody. This is a really good way to just kind of put you in a mindset of it. Say you're chasing somebody, and they're a little bit slower than you. They might have some slower reactions than you, so they're not hitting the layout as fast as you would. So you're having to kind of e-brake or left foot brake or things like that. As you're accelerating behind them, and say they're going around a certain part of the course slower than you would, and you're having to kind of sit there and just e-brake and check up behind them, you're going to constantly be, as you pull your e-brake and let go of it, you're going to be loading the front and unloading the front of the car, as well as unloading the rear and then loading the rear back down as you let go of the e-brake and get back on throttle, and then you maybe pull the e-brake again and then let go of it and get back on throttle, and you're going to load back up again. This is going to be affected by the spring rates that you have. So say you have the 10K, 5K setup that I have on this, you're going to ideally want to run the rear shocks at a stiffer setting than your front shocks, because you already have a significantly stiffer front spring in this setup. You don't want to run too tight of a shock as well, because it's just going to make the front suspension very slow, rigid, sluggish with driver inputs, with road inputs, suspension inputs, stuff like that. So there is that balance, just like I described with the quick settings. They translate over to the regular damper settings as well. You don't want it to where you're hitting a huge load. Say you've got like kind of a whoop where maybe you're dropping down from an elevation change and you're getting back on throttle. You don't want to be hitting that whoop and decompressing and getting back on throttle, and it just slowly compressing down as you're getting back on throttle, because you're going to load up slowly, which is going to load the tires up slowly, which is going to slowly increase the amount of lateral and forward grip that you have. And then in transverse, you're going to have, if you have your front too stiff with your retraction and your tightening, it's going to unload too slow, and then it's going to load back down too slow as well. So you're going to get that really slow response. You're going to get really slow feel from the car and what it's doing and how it's reacting to your inputs, and dropping down that elevation change and stuff like that. So I recommend that people take a nice baseline setting. I have here is a pretty, like, not straightforward, but it's not some crazy, like, I've got 4,050 here, and I've got 5,760 here, stuff like that. I've just got nice round numbers that kind of correlate with the way I have my spring rates, and the weight distribution of the car, and just go drive it. That's the biggest thing, is just get a good baseline of what you would think might work well, as far as, like, I've got a I've got an 8K, 6K, base spring on an S chassis, so I'm gonna set my, my shock absorber to 4,500 in the front and 5,000 in the rear for my compression, and I'm gonna set my retraction to 6,000 and 7,000 or something like that. Just get a nice round number and go drive it and see how it feels. Kind of look back and forth with your camera, kind of go over bumps and stuff like that, and really pay attention to, is your car hitting these bumps and decompressing back to its resting position like it should be? Is it hitting these bumps and it's kind of bouncing a little bit, where you're getting too much spring feel? So it's one of those things where you really want to pay attention to that kind of stuff. And this is going to make things like having to e-brake through a transition from a high-speed corner, slowing down and lining yourself up for an outside clip. This is going to, the regular damper settings that you have here, this is going to determine how your car is going to react to your inputs as you're pulling your e-brake through that transition, and you have your suspension kind of unloaded as you're slowing down into it, and then as you roll back into the throttle and you start, so you're going around a left-hand turn and you're counter steering, and as you get back on throttle, you're kind of loading back down, and you want to make sure that it is responding to you quickly, but it's not so soft that it's just kind of, loading back down and it's just kind of doing this, as you're trying to load back down into it. So it's, it's the easiest way for me to explain this is just to give you guys visuals of what might be happening if, you have your dampers set a certain way. So it's one of those things where it's just, like I said before, it's not a end all be all, this is how you should set your dampers, this is the numbers you should have your dampers at. Absolutely not. No shade towards anybody else, but if anybody tells you, put your dampers at these numbers, this is how they should be, it's just wrong. It's wrong. It just is, because you can have the same car with the same spring rates, with the same tire adhesion, with the same horsepower, and you can go from Red Rock to Atrin. And Atrin is going to allow you to run a different damper setup that is going to be more ideal than the damper setup that you had on Red Rock. Just because the road surface changed. That's it. That's the only variable that changed, was your road surface. And you can immediately run a different damper setup that's going to be more ideal for a smoother flat track than something like Red Rock, that is going to be more of a street surface, that's going to have a lot of bumps and cracks and dips and humps in the road. And that's one, I keep seeing a lot in the community is, put your suspension this way and put your alignment this way and put your dampers this way. This is the best way to do it. It changes from every car to every spring rate that you're going to change on the car. Just, taking the same exact car and going from a 10K to a 12K spring, you're going to have to change your dampers to change that, because you're running a stiffer spring rate, which is going to let you run a softer damper. It's going to give you more tunability, and on top of that, you're going to have a naturally stiffer suspension from the stiffer spring rate, so you're going to have to bring that damper and dial it back down just a little bit to make sure that it's not this super rigid, bumpy, hella flush camber gang car that's just hitting bumps in the road and the whole car is just bouncing off the road because it doesn't have any suspension travel. Suspension travel is key with drifting. It's how you're going to get your grip. It's how you're going to get your response. It's how you're going to keep your car settled. It's how you're going to make it easy to drive. It's going to be the difference in, you're having your wheel in front of you and, say you're, counter steer going over a turn, and if you have your compression soft to a proper rate and you have your decompression set right to where it's stiffer than your compression, and you're decompressing to a nice rate of speed back to its resting point and not over compressing, I'm counter steering around a turn, I'm on throttle and I'm hitting that bump, and instead of, I'm hitting that bump and I have my dampers tuned right, and it's just a nice little, just a little jolt like that, and that's all it is, versus, say I have my tightening and my rebound way too stiff to the point that my suspension just can't react to that bump. I'm counter steering over that bump and I'm hitting it, and it's, it's doing this, and it's unsettling the car, and I'm having to catch it and, get the car settled back down again and get my tires settled back down again. So it's it's crucial. Your dampers are crucial. I encourage people to spend time on them. Spend time digging into the tuning. Experiment with things. Change things. Try, I wonder, what would it feel like with this spring rate, and then putting my dampers to this, so that, I can run my dampers up in this range instead of this range down here because my spring is too soft. So it's just one of those things that you got to play with. But that was the biggest thing, is I wanted to explain how they work to you guys. It is as simple as your dampers are a measurement of resistance, not a measurement of stiffness. A measurement of stiffness is something like your springs, where you have the KN/M. That is, or in America, I'm used to pounds per square inch, or inches per. Oh Lord, it is way too early for this. I'm trying to give out values and I don't even remember what they are. But anyways, sorry. Please don't doubt me. Your spring stiffness, that is what that is. That is a measurement of stiffness. It's how much force it takes to compress that spring together. Your dampers are something totally different from that. It's not a coiled piece of metal that has a certain thickness and diameter that's going to determine how much force it takes to compress it. Your shocks are a chamber of gas and or oil that is going to have a way to set them to where they have a certain to them. So the higher the value equals the higher the resistance, which means the slower that they're going to react to things. Not how stiff they are, it's how slow they react. That's the biggest thing. So just glue this in your head. The softer they are, the faster they can react. The higher they are, the slower they're going to react. There is a happy balance in the middle. You don't want to go full soft. You don't always want to go full stiff. There are times where you can go full stiff. It depends on the track you're driving and your spring rates. Some of you might have seen that when I was tuning my S550 for the comp last week. I started getting really high in my base retraction for my dampers because I was getting too much rebound dropping off of the bank going into the infield for the Irwindale layout that we were running. So I was having to run my front and rear retraction pretty high because it was rebounding way too hard coming off of that dip. So, like I said, I feel like I keep repeating myself, but I feel like, that's what I need to do to help everybody understand how this works. Lower the number. The faster they can react, the more soft the suspension is going to feel because you're getting more of the spring feel versus the damper. The higher the number, the more resistance they're going to have, which means the slower they're going to react to things, which means the more that the damper is going to override the spring. So just engrave that in your head, glue it in the back of your head, whatever you need to do, and go play around with this stuff. It's as simple as that. Go play around with it. If you get confused for any reason, you can look up online. Just go to your search engine, go to your search bar, and type in, how do four-way dampers work? That's all you have to do. And there will be tons of peer-reviewed articles from suspension companies and from aftermarket builders and things like that is going to explain this stuff in writing. And I know some people, they're more visual learners, some people are more literature learners. So if you get confused for some reason, just go look it up real quick. That's all you got to do, and it's super simple. Just like I said, I'm gonna say it one more time. Just remember, the lower the number, the faster it reacts, the softer, quote unquote, it's gonna feel. The higher the number, the stiffer it's gonna feel. The slower it's gonna react because it's gonna have more resistance to it. So find your balance. Remember, the stiffer that you run your spring, the softer you can run your damper. That's not me saying run your springs really stiff so you can run soft dampers. That's not what you want to do. There is a balance. That's why I encourage people to set your spring rates first and go to somewhere like Fuel Suspension's website or something like that and get the spring rate for the car that you're driving. Because these companies that build these coilovers for drift specific setups and things like that, they have tested them with you know, with everything from real world application to, them putting them through their paces to seeing what feels good and what doesn't, down to science and calculations and things like that based on the weight and the spring length and the shock weight, and the shock length, and the weight distribution of the vehicle and all this stuff. So you trust these companies and you use their information that they give you, and you're going to see a difference in how your cars feel on simulators. That's why I tell people, keep it as realistic as possible. You're gonna thank yourself later when you do that. So, set your spring stiffness first. Go to somewhere like fuelsuspension.com, get your spring rates, plug them in. Then go drive, see how it feels. See if the car is compressing too quick and decompressing too bouncy. Does it feel like it's compressing too fast to the point that it's spongy? Bring your tightening up. Then take your rebound or your retraction and bring your retraction up as well. Set it maybe 1,000 or 1,500 higher. Go drive it again. See how it feels. Are you hitting bumps? Does it feel good when you're hitting the bump, but when you're coming out of it, it's still decompressing too fast and it still feels kind of bouncy? Back out. Go to your retraction. Raise your retraction up again. Just play with it. That's all you have to do. Just get a basic understanding. As you watch this video, I hope I've explained this to you in a simple but informative way, that you can take this and apply it as you're going and tuning these dampers. So that's that. It's a little bit longer than I meant for it to be, but I wanted to make sure that I just explain this in the best way possible, because that is what I feel like I'm here for in the sim racing communities. I have a ton of knowledge with this stuff. I have a ton of knowledge with, real world applications with suspension and, setting up these cars and stuff like that, and, what's ideal and what's not, and what works and what doesn't. And when I tell you, you probably shouldn't do that, or I don't recommend you set it up that way, please run with it. I will never hesitate to share my knowledge. I am always here to answer people's questions. If you don't just have to ask me about the dampers. You can ask me about any of this stuff over here. You can ask me, Ben, why do you have your front roll bar at 0 and your rear roll bar set so high? Or, why is your Ackerman set this way? Things like that. That's one of those things, I'm going to reiterate it right now. Your Ackerman, 100% Ackerman, is 0 degrees of Ackerman in real life, which is what a drift knuckle kit is. That's what they come out of the box as, is 0 degrees of Ackerman. Please stop putting your Ackerman all the way down to 0 and 10 and 20%. It's just not realistic. You're hurting yourself. You're dragging your rear wheel. You're losing a ton of speed. You have a anti-spin cheat practically from doing that, and it's something that you shouldn't even be able to set it that way in the game. But I know people do it, and I'm trying to break people from that. So, sorry, went on a little bit of a rant there. But, like I said, I'm here to answer people's questions. And I am so tired of seeing all of these big famous content creators, and yes, you content creators, you know who I'm pointing a finger at. I am tired of seeing all these big content creators with this big following that have zero experience with building these cars and these suspensions and how they work and the technical side of all of this stuff, going and trying to give their knowledge that they have to people that are just trying to learn and understand and get good at these sims and learn about cars and stuff like that. I'm tired of people spreading incorrect information, which is just leading people down the wrong path, which is causing these people to then tell other people incorrect information. This stuff's got to stop. This is just it's a model that happens with everything. It happens with politics, with government, with just something as simple as just one fact about your family or something like that. And All it takes is that one person to spread around false information to 10 people, and then those 10 people spread it out to 10 people themselves, and now you have 100 people that are giving out false information to 1,000 people. And it's just, that's got to stop. And that's what I'm here to try and do. I know I'm not big and popular yet. I know I haven't been creating content for 5, 6, 7, 10 years, stuff like that. I haven't had the ability to, but I do now, and I have a lot to offer to everybody. So I'm looking at you big content creators as well. Come watch my video. I encourage you. I want you to. I want you to ask me questions. I want you to try and prove me wrong. I dare you. Quite frankly, that's what it is. You know what? I'm going for it. Like GD Media. I'm looking at you, for example, because I know how much clout you have in this community. Stop telling people how to set up their cars, please. Come talk to me. Come let me teach you, because that's what I want to do. I want to teach you how to set these cars up properly. Your driving will get better. You will have a better time driving on your wheel, because I've seen you drive on your wheel and it's not pretty. Let me teach you. The biggest thing is me breaking through to people that have such a following like you. I'm not discrediting your following. I'm not discrediting the content you put out. You put out great content. The issue is that your knowledge that you give out is wrong. The tuning advice that you give out is wrong. It is not ideal. It is not preferential. It is not something that needs to be spread around as an end-all be-all like it gets portrayed in the community. So, people like you, come talk to me, please. I encourage you. I want you to try and prove me wrong, and I want to share my knowledge with you. I do. I'm a friendly guy. I'm a super nice guy. The people that know me know what kind of person I am. So, I'm off of that rant. I'm going to hop off of this stream. I appreciate everyone that watches. I appreciate everyone that comes and finds me on Twitch, that gives me those follows and stuff like that. I appreciate the people that subscribe to me on YouTube. I'm going to keep uploading videos like this. I'm going to start getting some more driving content on my YouTube and stuff like that. And like I said, I'm always here. I'm always here to answer people's questions. Throw a comment down in the comments below, whether it's on YouTube or Twitch when I'm live. You can shoot me a whisper on Twitch. I'll answer it. I don't have it turned off. If you're in a group with me on CarX and you see me comment on something, shoot me a PM if you have a question. Be like, hey, Ben, I saw you comment on this. I had a question the other day, and, can you explain how this works to me? Yeah, gladly. I would love to. I would absolutely love to. I love helping people. It makes my heart happy. So, like I said, if you're on a wheel on CarX and you don't know about us yet, CarX Wheel Community, look us up on Facebook, answer the questions, join the group, ask away, please. Look up Team TopLine. I'm the co-leader. I'm one of the drivers for the team. We try and fill that page with content. We try and give out some content. We try and just be a community for the team. We're always here to just drive with people, have a good time, hang out, have laughs, and help in any way we can, just like I do. I try and give my knowledge of tuning and building and automotive mechanics and stuff like that. And then, if you have questions as well, as far as, like, hey, can you give me some pointers, as I'm drifting, like, I initiate into a corner and my car does this when I do this. Can you explain to me why it's doing that? Yeah, I can help you figure out if it's your tune or if it's you. It's one of those things, and it's practice, practice, practice. If you're on a wheel, this game isn't just a pick up and play thing. I encourage people to not, play with their wheel like this, on 180 degrees, or, on 270 like this. This isn't an arcade racer. I don't even want to see you playing on 540 or 360 or something like that. I want to see you taking your wheel, and I want you to spin it all the way around, all the way to lock, over to here, 1,000 degrees right here. From side to side is 1,000 degrees. Use all of this. This is what a real car is all of this rotation. It's a sim. Play it like one. Turn your wheel assist off. I appreciate everybody. Sorry I got on a little bit of a tangent there, but it's something that's been really bothering me and hasn't been sitting well with me. I hope everybody has a fantastic day. Um, like I said, if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I encourage it. I would love for you to. Um, and, keep drifting fun.